Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program. Time now for our regular Tuesday conversation with members of the Brattleboro Reformer staff. Day editor Bob Audette taking a turn today. How's it going, Bob?
Great, Chris. How are you today?
Doing all right. And we're trying to do this simultaneously with a Facebook feed as well as doing it on the telephone. And it's great because I can see the little delay between your answers and your face on here. So this is going to be really disconcerting as we go through this conversation today. But
well, don't look, Chris.
Oh, that's probably the best advice I could be given all day. Glad to have you on the call this week because of everything that happened last week with the case of Nathan Carman, this Vernon resident who was lost at sea for a week with his mother in Rhode Island. She apparently drowned in the incident, and then all of a sudden, all the revelations that he is also related to Mr. Chikalos, who was murdered in West Chesterfield last year. Now, this really started as a small story for the Reformer. I believe the first article you wrote about it was basically just a wire story that was on the inside of the page.
Yeah, I need to make a correction, though. John Chikalos wasn't murdered in Chesterfield. He was actually murdered in his home in Windsor, Connecticut.
Thank you. Right. He has the home in West Chesterfield, but it was at his Connecticut home where the murder took place. That's an important clarification.
Well, we, like everybody, we heard about this, just on the regular news, and we really didn't see any connection with our local area. There was I think one of the wire stories did mention, one of my reporters, actually, Chris Mays, picked up on it at the end of the story that he had moved to Vernon about 2.5 years ago, and that's when the wheels started turning, and we decided we better start doing a little more work on the story.
Yeah, when I first saw that reference, I wondered if it was Vernon, Connecticut, because he has family in Connecticut, and I was like, oh no, this is Vernon, Vermont. They're talking about our coverage area, and then it really turned up into a situation where national media was coming to town to do stories about this incredible lost at sea and being rescued at sea story. So it almost, for you guys, became a media covering a media kind of story.
It is a little unusual. I understand why the national media would probably respond to this, especially when they started pulling all the threads together. But I know some of the neighbors down in Vernon weren't too happy with having 10 news organizations, 6 satellite trucks, and even a helicopter flying overhead. Not sure what they all thought they were going to get out of this guy.
Right. Were you, as a media resource, called upon by any of these national sources? I've had that happen before when I've worked at newspapers in a local area, and some of the more national sources say, hey, can you give me a little background just on the area or any of the people? Does that sort of coordination happen here?
Not with this story. They might have contacted some of the local TV stations. The last time I think we actually talked to the national media, this might have been before your time, when a bus taking a bunch of college kids to a ski area flipped over on its side on I-91.
Oh, no, I don't remember that. That must have been before I moved back to the area.
Might have been 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay. So in this instance, though, there wasn't a need to check with you guys on or what about after the Chikalos story? I mean, was there anything there that you think they might have called on you and you would have been able to help augment?
No, all that stuff was already documented, and there was nothing new about the case in Chesterfield or in Windsor, Connecticut, so I'm not surprised they didn't contact us. Yeah.
Do you think how much more of a hype factor was that side story of the murdered grandfather in this case? It doesn't seem like it seems like an extreme coincidence more than anything relevant to this young man being lost at sea.
Well, I make no assumptions.
Right.
But the fact that he was the last one to see his grandfather alive, and the last one to see his mother alive, and that his grandfather gave $40 million to his 4 daughters, $10 million of which you would presume went to Nathan's mother, of course people are going to wonder. Yeah,
and I guess they have done some research into some of his own violent past. I've seen stories about that in the Associated Press. But none of these things are really anything that adds up to local coverage. Is it something that you plan on pursuing? You had a couple of front page stories on it last week, but do you think it's something that is worth following with a reporter at this point?
Only if something new comes out as far as any investigation into his mother's disappearance, or, the police in Connecticut actually try to forward an investigative report to the DA down there again about the murder of his grandfather. I don't see us following up on it unless something new breaks in the story.
And when you talk about following up on it in those cases, would you do something beyond just republishing a wire report? Would you actually assign a reporter or do some reporting on it yourself?
Hard to say. To say. I mean, it depends on what kind of local angle would come up out of it. So, I mean, if the local police show up and serve a search warrant, we might have to do something, search warrant again. But at this point, it's hard to say how we'd cover any additional complications or stories arising.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of coincidence he ended up in Vernon, Vermont. He could have ended up anywhere else, and it would have been just kind of one of those stories, but it made the CBS News feed. It made a lot of the television coverage, and made the Brattleboro Reformer front page a couple of weeks. Bob Audette doing the byline honors on that. Is that something that you normally do, a lot of the court reporting and a lot of the crime reporting for the paper anyway, even if you had the full staff right now?
Well, we all pitch in to do whatever we can here to get the news out.
That's right. And get it out on the air, too, which I certainly appreciate. And important, I think, hard to do, especially with the resources that daily newspapers have, but to stay on top of trial news and things happening. And going back to a November 2014 case where a woman, Robin O'Neill, has allegedly murdered father and son Stephen and Jameis Lott. There was an update last week about this case. Give us the latest.
Well, this case was supposed to have been gone to trial by now, and Robin O'Neill's been into her fourth attorney now. The reasons why, who really knows? And she was going to claim diminished capacity. One of her previous attorneys said she was drunk at the time that she allegedly shot the pair, which might be a reason why she doesn't have that attorney anymore, because now she's saying she doesn't need to claim diminished capacity because although she might have been intoxicated, she didn't kill the two gentlemen. So they're also her defense counsel is also asking for an extension on discovery because they're claiming that the previous attorneys didn't do a good enough job. So there's been motions filed on both sides, the defense and the prosecution, about whether or not they should extend discovery, learn a little bit more from experts and witnesses before it goes to trial, and who knows when that might be, if it ever does go to trial.
Yeah, I was surprised. It was one of these cases, and unfortunately we've had far too many of these criminal cases of late in our community, but I had forgotten about this one that took place out in Townsend back in November of 2014, and that explains why it sort of got fallen through the cracks with all those attorney changes. Has Ms. O'Neill been incarcerated this entire time, do we know?
She has. She is being held. There's in a murder trial, there's pretty much no way that a suspect would be released. Yeah,
I mean, but think about that. If she's claiming her innocence and to be serving time during this whole time, that's definitely got to be hard. But if she's not happy with the representation, I guess she's bringing that on herself to a certain degree. You bring up that point about somebody when they wouldn't be released based on the crime, and more contemporary case having to do with a Putney resident, Jason Bunch is his name. He was already facing federal charges of drug trafficking, and then he was at this residence on, I love the name of this road in Putney, High-Low Biddy Road, out there in Putney during a shootout back in August. Released on his own recognizance, according to the report you filed over the weekend. Somebody on Facebook asked this question, which was my question too, is considering the federal drug charges and this shootout, why did the judge feel it was okay to release him in this instance?
I have no idea, Chris. In these cases, it's really a case-by-case basis. A lot of times, it's not necessarily whether someone is a danger or not to society, but whether there's a concern that he might actually flee from prosecution. So there might be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and the reasons for why the gunshots were fired, we don't even know for sure if he was pulling the trigger. So there's probably a lot of discussions going on that led up to releasing him, and it might even be contingent on him testifying against someone. So
right.
how do we know? We don't know these until it actually comes out in court documents or in a courtroom.
Yeah, well, it's a strange kind of intersection of a couple of different incidents, right? What he was being released on his own recognizance from technically didn't have anything to do with the shootout. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it's on trafficking heroin and cocaine.
Right, it's on this older charge, and I remember when this story came out, it was almost like he kind of just happened to be at the house when this shooting between these other parties involved were there. So there's probably going to be another trial with him being implicated for that particular incident as well, I would imagine.
Or maybe he's being called as a witness. Who knows?
Yeah. So is it something that, based on what you've seen in similar cases, did it surprise you that he was released on his own recognizance? Or, I mean, it almost sounds like there might not be any kind of basis of comparison for what happened here.
No, not at all. These people are released all the time. I mean, they have a number of conditions that they're released on, and as long as they abide by the conditions, they can stay out amongst us. And, they're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and there's a reason why we have those constitutional protections.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to ask you, speaking of Facebook comments, one of the things that I used to do with Tom DeRico when he would do these segments is we would look at places on the Facebook page of stories that you all have posted and what got the most comments, and kind of use that as a way to give the editors a chance to give feedback and elaborate, provide context on different things. The op-ed that you all posted the weekend before the weekend that just passed, having to do with the Fraternal Order of Police Union's endorsement of Donald Trump and the Reformer op-ed, calling it deplorable, spurred quite a few amusing comments, I would say, on your Facebook page, mostly not understanding the difference between an op-ed and reporting. But I kind of wanted to use that as an opportunity to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that, with the editorial board that happens at the Reformer, and kind of remind people about that distinction between the role of the newspaper as a leader in thought and then as a reporting mechanism.
As far as I know, every newspaper has an op-ed page in which they publish letters, cartoons, various opinions from some regular contributors, and then other interesting submissions we get. And as long as I've been at the Reformer and been helping out with the editorial page, our own opinion, and that's why it's always titled Our Opinion or Editorial. This has been a tradition that goes back years and years and years since the founding of newspapers. Actually, newspapers were pretty biased, not only on their op-ed pages, but the history is in the news reporting, too. So, of course, the Reformer's often been accused of presenting biased news reports. I think that happens with any newspaper, and that's just part of the game. But to say we shouldn't publish our opinion on the opinion page, it goes against the tide of history. It's just an uninformed assumption that we never publish our opinion, and to accuse the Reformer of being a liberal rag, well, I don't know what newspaper you've been reading over the years. We're probably have one of the most liberal opinion editorial pages in the country, and it's something we've always been proud of, and we never hidden that fact. Yeah,
it's been part of the editorial voice of the paper for a long time. It's just kind of funny. Some people seem to, their response on Facebook, the first poster, and this is why I can't stand the Reformer anymore, because they need to learn to report things and not their political, uneducated views. Like it says, our opinion here. What kind of discussions going into this election season, though, have you had around op-eds? Has there been a attempt? I mean, I think that it's fair to say that certainly there was more support for Bernie Sanders in this community than there was for Hillary Clinton. Was there discussion at any point, or has there been discussion at any point about trying to cast a critical eye on her campaign?
I think that we've probably published a few, not our own editorials, that have been critical of Hillary. As far as our editorial board is concerned, we support Hillary's candidacy, and anything we write in-house will be in support of her candidacy. So we may run things that are critical of her.
Right. But you don't, at least in the past few election cycles, you have not formally endorsed candidates, either on the national level or on the state level. Is that something you think is going to continue into this campaign season?
That's probably going to change with our new ownership. I'm not making any predictions when that might happen, but our new ownership is definitely a little more involved in discussing public opinion and our own opinion.
Interesting. I mean, considering it's been amazing to hear about all these newspaper endorsements. Oh, well, I guess they're not necessarily endorsements for Hillary Clinton, right? They're endorsements against Donald Trump, but all these papers that have never voted Democrat or never endorsed a Democrat, or even USA Today saying, we're not going to tell you to vote for Hillary Clinton, we're just going to tell you not to vote for Trump. It's got to be, as somebody in the business, fascinating to watch this.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe not.
I think it's important for us to, if we're going to endorse Hillary, it's not as an attack on Trump. We have to make the good points, the reasons why we're endorsing Hillary, and not because she's running against Donald Trump. We'd have to point that out against any of her opponents. So while we may feel that Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our system as the way we know it, we should not be saying vote for her because you're going to get him instead. We should be explaining point for point why she is the most qualified, as President Obama said, perhaps the most qualified person to ever run for president.
Yeah. We're talking with Bob Audette, editor of the Brattleboro Reformer. Been focusing mostly on stories from the past week, but you have a story in today's paper about Titos Tacos, and a lot of people are enjoying that food vendor. What's your story about today?
Well, apparently Titos Tacos is a trademarked name for a single storefront in Culver City called Titos Tacos. And we had a picture of Tito Garza at the Bacon Fest selling burritos, and I believe we had that in a Monday issue, maybe, I guess it might have been Monday the 19th. Mm-hmm. Not real sure. I don't remember. September 19th. It was right after the Bacon Fest.
Right after the Bacon Fest, so that's probably
we got
the day.
a email cease and desist order telling us we had to take the picture down because it was an infringement of this Titos Tacos in California. We didn't quite feel that it was an infringement of any trademark because it was basically just a picture of a guy selling tacos. If anybody was infringing a trademark, it was Tito, unfortunately. And
right.
When I called him that day, and he was very surprised and very worried because he had not received a cease and desist order. And he did get one the next day. And talking with Tito, he was pretty upset about it, but he understood, and he's probably in the process of changing his name right now because any money he's got is going right into his business. He's just not going to pay a lawyer $10,000 to fight a trademark infringement, no matter how flippant or how ridiculous it is to sue from California some guy who's selling tacos in Vermont.
I know.
We took it up as, and I'm glad that we got much support from our new ownership, including our president, and he informed them that, we've got the right to print pretty much any kind of picture we want, and that's guaranteed under the First Amendment right, and we will not be pulling the picture, and we probably will print more pictures like we did today. So I expect we're going to hear from them again about pulling pictures off our website, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I mean, fair use, right? It's a journal. As a journalist, you're taking a picture of something out there. You're not using it to sell something, as you said. If anything, Tito certainly is somebody who has to be worried about this, and I'm sure he'll take the proper steps to protect himself. But trying to attack a newspaper, that one is comical, to be sure. And yeah, they don't quite understand the backing you have legally.
Well, I don't, and I don't understand it either. They're contending that they've often filed these requests of newspapers such as the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, which gladly fulfilled the request to pull these pictures down after they infringed on a trademark, and I really find that hard to believe. Yeah,
I'd be interested in hearing more context about that at some point. But good for you for taking a stand on that issue. Now, anything that coming out, obviously there's a select board meeting tonight. There'll be some reporting on that we'll talk to Chris Mays about next week. But other stories coming up this week that are in the budget that you want to tease that readers should be looking out for.
I wish I could answer that question right now, but we got a lot going on today, and I'm not really sure what's going to be in tomorrow's paper, what's going to be ready, and what's going to be completed.
All right. You're a day editor. You can only think one day ahead, huh?
Maybe usually only 2 or 3 hours ahead.
All right. Well, Bob, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. That was Bob Audette of the Brattleboro Reformer, reformer.com. Back with more Green Mountain Mornings after these messages.